with the hands up, jean jacket, white pants.
My shooting crew and I have been getting into using commed headsets for shooting drills lately. We've been using comms to coordinate shots and call targets for each other just to see if we could manage it over any sort of open distance. This is good for a lot of different reasons. If you have any kind of crew that you're planning on running with in any sort of situation, having comms is pretty important. Anything over 50 feet, 50 yards, you start really having to yell to each other, and having communication is really important, especially if you do have line of sight over each other. But you put something simple like 100 yards of distance between both of you, then it turns into a yelling match. All of a sudden, having comms is a good way.
Repeat what, Pant?
White pants, blue jacket, engage.
That being said, we had different people with different levels and different setups using comms drills, going from budget setups up to higher end comm gear. And I just thought I'd go over some of that, since it's kind of hard to find a solid video going over mainly connector types and different ways you kind of not work around it, but different setups you could have. Again, I make all my videos based off of stuff that I had a hard time finding. Again, this isn't really going to be a review video. I try not to do review videos. This is going to be a more of kind of like a how-to video. We're going to go over how to set up different levels of gear from budget up to like a little bit more expensive. And mainly go over connector types and different pitfalls that people kind of run into setting up their comm gear. For this video, the main radio we're going to be using is the Baofeng UVR radios. These are super common and relatively cheap, and they're a really good starting radio for people that want to get into comms. I'm not going to really go into the Baofeng too much, just be aware of what the federal, state, and local laws are regarding that. Just like any kind of shooting gear, you should be aware of what you're allowed to do with your gear and equipment. You wouldn't buy a lower receiver, put a stock on it, and slap a 10.3 barrel on it without really kind of, you should know what the laws are around it. You can do whatever you want, but you should at least know what the laws are around it. The same thing with the Baofeng, and like I said, I'm not going to really go too far into it, but just be aware of what the laws are around the Baofengs. The three setups that we're going to use are going to be budget setup, mid-tier setup, and then kind of like, I guess, a military quality setup. So let's go and cut into it. And like I said, I'm going to go really over the connector types, the pitfalls you could run into, and how to really set up your gear. Starting with the basics of connecting your comm gear, there's about 5 different variables that you could have in setting up your gear. The biggest variables being your connectors. There's multiple kinds of plugs going into the radio. A lot of the radios have their own proprietary plug styles, so right there you're already going to have a lot of different options just in the plugs, and then a few more options connecting your headset to your push to talk. So again, there's quite a few different styles of connector to your push to talk, and then your push to talk also has quite a few connectors that need to go to your radio. So for this setup, again, everyone has to check their radios, see what their connector style is. For the Baofengs, they use a Kenwood 2-pin, and that's what you're going to use to connect to this. So again, when you're buying your gear, make sure your connector goes to your radio. So you have to get a push-to-talk for this setup, a push-to-talk that has a Kenwood 2-pin. And then you also have to make sure that you're using the right connector style to your push-to-talk. This headset is the Sordens, so this one uses the U94, the TP120 NATO style connector. Tons of different connectors. There's 10-pin connectors. There's, I think, 3 or 4 others that are out there, all different radio connectors. This one is pretty universal as far as military headsets go. The other 3 variables that you have are going to be in your microphone boom and your push to talk, also referred to as a PTT, push to talk. The push to talk either needs to be amplified or non-amplified. And the last two are going to be in your connector and your microphone boom. Your microphone boom is either going to be dynamic or electret. And your connector, if it's the U94 or the TP102 pin, I think sometimes these are also referred to as 7mm plugs, I could be wrong. These are either going to be NATO or civilian wired. The dynamic boom, which is used by most military headsets, are more of an analog type microphone boom. They use analog to transfer voice to electronic audio, while the electric uses more kind of a traditional electronic microphone boom to transfer it here. With the dynamic, you need a amplified push to talk. With an electric boom, you need a non-amplified push to talk. So your boom is going to depend on what push to talk you get. This one is a non-amplified because this is electret microphone boom. This one also has a military NATO wiring. So inside of this needs to be electrically connected to connect to the NATO wiring. So again, with all 5 of my different variables, I have a Kenwood 2-pin that needs to connect to this Baofeng. This push to talk needs to be a non-amplified NATO wired push to talk for the TP120 U94 connector. Again, that's just with my setup. You start talking about different headsets, different connectors, and all those variables could really just make your commed headset not work, not transmit, not hear. You'll get one or the other, and you just run into a lot of different problems. So that's more or less what this video is going over, the different levels of setup and talking about the connectors. So again, all those different variables are going to play into what gear you need to buy. You need to know those 5 things that I just stated. Getting into the different level setups, this is the absolute budget build setup. It works relatively okay. Somebody else did another setup similar to this that I shot with, and their problem is it is all cheap stuff. This stuff is mostly coming off of Amazon, and the quality of the build on some of these little components are just not there. Mainly with this push to talk, I have not had any issues with this push to talk. Somebody else had their sling grab it, and when he yanked it like that, the push to talk just totally fell apart. This one has got a little Velcro piece on the back, so the cool thing is I could hook it to any piece of gear. The button is incredibly small, so you kind of have to hunt for it. You have to put it into a really good place. When you're shooting and your eyes are downrange and you're trying to search around for your push to talk, it's incredibly small to get. And again, quality is just not super there. Maybe if you buy something like this, you could put some kind of epoxy on the back to prevent it from really falling apart. The push to talk is a push to talk with 3.5mm jack adapter. I bought this one off of Amazon. I will try to put a link in the description below. All this does is connect with the 2-pin Kenwood to your radio, and then it has an option to connect any 3.5mm regular standard headset jack to it. So with this, it'll transfer audio into here, and it'll also transfer microphone audio back to the radio. I think Safariland or TCI, which is kind of the same company, make something similar to this. It costs a lot more off of their website, but I'm sure the quality is much better. This one is a $15 one off of Amazon. I think the one from Safariland or TCI costs closer to the $50 range. So now that you have your push to talk connected to your radio, then you use your 3.5mm jack to connect a headset with a built-in microphone to this. For mine, I actually used a PlayStation 3 mono headbud. The idea behind this is that you have something with a built-in microphone that you could put underneath your hearing protection. So only you could hear the audio. You could still transmit with a built-in microphone. Another good choice is maybe something like the corded iPhone headbuds. You want something very, very low profile that'll fit relatively easy underneath the head. These are my regular hearing protection that I wear whenever I go shooting. This small mono earbud fits really easy underneath there. And I could put it underneath. I kind of obviously lose a little bit of hearing in this one ear because my ear's already plugged up, so the sound amplification that comes from this whenever people are talking kind of goes. But it works relatively well. The downsides with this setup is depending on which headphone and microphone you're using, sometimes you get some weird electronic impedance issues going back or coming from. Sometimes with different headphones I kind of experimented with, you could hear popping whenever you transmit, whenever you key, or whenever you key up, there's constant slight static, or whenever you talk into the microphone, it sounds a little bit staticky as well. With this actual Sony PlayStation mono bud, not like a knockoff aftermarket one, this is an actual Sony one. I have no issues. It sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty clear. Everybody that I was shooting with said it sounded perfectly fine. Two other issues you run into with this budget setup is there's already a lot of cable here, and I do already have a lot of extra cable tucked in underneath in the extra pouch right here. This setup just comes with tons of extra wiring cable. It turns more into a cable management game once you need to get set up. You got to make sure your cables are running so they're not hooking on different things, they're not snagging in different places. If you don't get it just right, then you could easily rip something off when your sling or a rifle or a mag grabs one of these things and yanks it off really hard. The other downfall is having an earbud in your hearing protection is not super comfortable. It's okay for an hour or two, but once you start pushing longer shooting days, like 3-4 hours, or if you're really doing something a little bit more crazy where you actually have to wear them for 5 or 6 hours or longer, it'll probably start to hurt having this thing shoved in your ear, tucked underneath your hearing protection all day. Once you get your budget set up all squared away, it should look something like this. Your Amazon push to talk that costs $15 is running into your roughly $30-$40 Baofeng, running to your $15, $10 Amazon mono headset with a built-in microphone. Again, any earbud with a built-in microphone will work. Sometimes you'll get some kind of impedance issues. You really just have to experiment around, and that can kind of suck. Spending $10 here for a headset didn't work, another $15 for a headset that didn't work, and then just keep cutting through them until you find one that actually works. That could get really annoying. Like I said, these are my hearing protection I regularly use. This is the Safariland HP2s, I think that's what they're called. These ones are pretty good. The main reason I like them, though, is the behind the neck style is so universally good. I could use it for so many different things. The behind the head, behind the neck style of hearing protection, comm, headphones, whatever you want to call them. I just really like these style because they will work for a lot of different purposes. You could wear them underneath a boonie hat. The boonie hat still has full coverage over your head. You could wear these over a baseball cap really easy. You could just wear them without anything. They still fit perfectly fine. And they also fit underneath a helmet really easy without interfering with the pads that you have on the helmet. And the behind the neck portion just doesn't even get in the way of the helmet. So I really like these, very universal with how you could wear them and what you could wear them on. The Liberator is actually pretty good too. You switch them to like something similar to arc rail adapters. They have their own, or you could put on a traditional headband, or you could have the behind the neck style. So again, Liberator 2 HP hearing protection, very universal. They sell a commed version of them, but then they start getting very expensive very quick. I think it could easily run up to $700 for the commed version of these. The next setup for comms that we have is more of like an intermediate or middle of the road setup. I think this actually is probably one of the better setups for the price that you get. Again, the problem with it is the quality of some of the gear, but for the frequency and the realistic use of having to use commed headset in any kind of real application for somebody that doesn't do it for a job is pretty unlikely, but having the capability I think is important. Again, the quality is not the best. I think long-term, everyday use ruggedness of this gear, I don't think it would absolutely hold up. But I think using it for an emergency use, I think it'll work perfectly fine. I'm going to go ahead and say this is almost like a clone build of actual military gear setup. None of it is actually used by the military, but it has a lot of the same essentials and the streamlined features for it. The headset is the Earmore M32s. I think these ones are like the Mod 3 or something, whatever they call them. But I really like the headset. Again, I don't think the quality's super hardcore on point. I think long-term everyday use, you'd see some things starting to break pretty quick. I think every now and then using it, you won't have any issues. And the other one that we have is just a generic from Amazon push-to-talk. I think this probably didn't run that much money. I think this one cost another $15 from Amazon. Quality is something to question as well on this. Again, this isn't really a review video, so I'm not going to go into the M32s too much, but for $85, $84, $89, whatever you get them for off of Amazon for being a commed headset that has military connectors, I think they're really good. One of my favorite features about this headset is you could actually disconnect the microphone boom on the Mod 3. You gotta unscrew right here. I think you could maybe pop out this connector to completely get it off, but it looks pretty brittle. Like I said, the quality of the plastic, and it doesn't look like it would hold up over heavy use. But the boom can be disconnected. All you got to do is disconnect right here. It's this little tiny audio jack. You could actually switch sides if you really wanted to. You could connect it over here. So if you're a left-hand shooter, you could still switch the boom so it doesn't interfere when you shoot. Like I said, you take this screw off right here and you can just totally remove the boom. And whenever you go to the range, if you want to still use this headset, you don't look like you're trying to be some tactical guy at the indoor range or even the outdoor range with a microphone boom on his headset when you're not doing any kind of tactical comm drills. This could be easily just kind of cabled up right here with this Velcro against the headset. It's not a big deal. And again, the connector on this is the TP120 U94 connector. This one is actually military NATO connectored. It's not the civilian wiring, which is kind of nice because then you don't really have to mess around with the push-to-talk. This is connected for most military push-to-talk headsets. The only thing is, since it's not a dynamic microphone, it's electric, you have to make sure you get a non-amplified push-to-talk. The other portion to this is the push-to-talk. This one came from Amazon. I just typed in TP120 NATO wired push-to-talk non-amplified, because since that's an electric boom, it needs to be non-amplified. This one was non-amplified for sure, but the problem was this one was civilian wired. It came from whatever company was selling it off of Amazon, and it was wired for civilian wiring, and this connector, it was made for NATO wiring. So just the wiring on the inside needed to be resoldered. If you don't have an ability to solder and you get something like that, that could suck really fast, because then you don't have the ability to change it. You have to go buy another one. If you do have the ability to solder, all you do is you open it up. Inside there's 4 connectors. You just need to look up the diagram, which I will probably just do a snapshot on this video of it. It's actually pretty easy to do, but still annoying, and that's just one of those pitfalls you could run into setting up your gear. Amplified versus non-amplified, civilian wiring versus NATO wiring, which is really dependent inside of here and the connectors. So all set up, these commed hearing protection setups are very streamlined. This is it. What you see is all that's really to it. You have the Kenwood 2-pin that comes off of the push-to-talk. You route this on your gear, you push the button, you hold it down to talk, and you're always hearing noise coming in through the headset, and your boom is obviously what sends the audio, so you don't really have to yell or anything. The boom's right in front of your face. The nice thing with, I think it's almost all commed headsets, is even if you don't have batteries in your hearing protection for noise amplification or decibel reduction during gunshots, you still have the ability to transmit and receive from your radio. It's just simply a pass-through for audio. and hearing. It's almost like headphones. Just headphones don't need batteries. You plug it into whatever device and they work. This is exactly the same way for most commed headsets. Like I said, you don't have batteries in here, they die, whatever, doesn't matter. You can still hit the push to talk, you transmit, and you can still hear the audio passing through, which is super cool. This whole setup right here run pretty cheap. I mean, it was about, I think I got this for $84 from Amazon, another $15 for the push to talk, and then the 30 to 40 for the Baofeng. So altogether, you're already in for less than 150 for a streamlined, almost military clone-ish commed headset that you could even remove the microphone boom off of this and use this as your everyday hearing protection if you wanted to. Again, very impressed with the cost of this setup and the capabilities that it has. This is the last build, which is, I would say, a little bit more higher end, because everything on this is actually military quality, except for the radio. I'm still using the Baofeng, but everything else on here is actually higher end, really good gear. Starting with the push to talk, this is a push to talk from Disco 32. They sell a lot of gear to civilians that are high quality stuff. I think the military uses push to talks that are made by Nexus, and these are actual Nexus push to talks. They got a little bit more rubberized connectors on them, so they're really waterproof. The quality is already way better. These are pretty good hard plastic where it needs it to be, or it's metal in other places. The push to talk feels a lot more solid. It's just a lot better quality. Again, this one is a non-amplified, because on my MSA Swordens, which are the hearing protection part, this is an electric, so non-amplified, NATO wired push to talk with the Kenwood 2-pin for the Baofeng. The MSA Swordens are the other part. These are sometimes issued to military people, but they're really used by police and SWAT a lot. The hearing protection works decently well. There behind the head is a little bit older of a design. It's actually just these 2 pins, or 2 prongs that kind of hold them into place, so it doesn't make a super tight connection. If I'm using these indoors, you definitely need to use second means of hearing protection, throw in some earplugs or whatever the case. If you're outdoors, it's not too bad. I got some of the gel hearing pads for these, so to make a tighter seal. The noise amplification and decibel reduction from these are incredible. The microphone picks up noise crystal clear. It just sounds really good, and the audio coming in is really amazing. Again, I like the behind the neck style, because if I want to use these without a helmet, I absolutely can. If I want to throw them underneath my helmet, doesn't even bother them. It's perfectly fine. I don't need to change my hearing pads, or my helmet pads. I'm sorry. You don't need to change your helmet pads or anything. They fit underneath very easily. So again, this is a higher end build, brand new. The MSA Swordens cost, I think, closer to $500, which isn't bad for a commed headset. I bought these ones used for $230. The Disco 32 push to talk, which is a very high quality, is another $100. So right there, you're already pushing $330 something just for these 2 pieces alone. There's definitely a lot of other hearing protections that work very amazing. You can get the Safariland Liberator 2s that are comm. Those run $700. The CommTacs from Peltor are really amazing. Those are pretty much a universal standard go-to for headset comms. And then the last is really like the OpsCore amps. Those run closer to $900, and those are just absolutely phenomenal. Those are absolutely amazing. So different levels of commed gear for sure. Just kind of showing you different setups and how to, and again, just really going over connectors, because I had a hard time finding all of that stuff when I was setting mine up. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope that you got something out of it. If you guys have any questions, please ask below. Setting up comms is, I think, pretty important for a team that actually plans on running together in case anything kind of crazy happens. I don't think we'll ever get to that point. Hopefully we never get to that point, but not having to yell to your buddy 100 yards away because you guys decided to cover 2 different angles is an important thing to be able to do, just having comms.